True leadership begins when you unlock the brilliance of the mind and lead with the resonance of the heart. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So, my name is Mariquita Solis. I'm an Uncaged Heart Coach, and I help men recognize their feelings and open their hearts so they can live an healthy, integrated lives and have healthy relationships. So today I'm very honored to be joined by someone who deeply understands the moral and intellectual framework of our connection to the world, philosopher John Sanbonmatsu. John is a professor of philosophy at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts, where he teaches courses in ethics, politics, and existentialism, and other topics. He's the author most recently of The Omnivore's Deception: What We Get Wrong About Meat, Animals, and Ourselves, a book by Jeffrey Moussaïf Masson, author of When Elephants Weep, has termed a masterpiece and perhaps the single best book ever written about animal suffering and why the world needs to go vegan. So he was speaking about John's book. I was tongue-tied, and I still am. But anyway, nevertheless, this show is perfectly imperfect, and I'm exhibiting that now. Professor Sanbonmatsu is also editor of the book Critical Theory and Animal Liberation and creator of the website cleanmeat-hoax.com, which raises skeptical questions about cellular or synthetic meat technology. His writing has appeared in Christian Science Monitor, Counterpunch, Huffington Post, and St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and other places. So thanks for joining, and thanks for your patience, John.
Thanks so much for having me, Mariquita. It's great to be here. Great to see you again.
Wait, now I can't hear you again. This darn thing.
I wonder if it's...
My speaker plays tricks. Okay.
Okay, testing. 1, 2,
yeah,
1,
I got
2.
You.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for having me again. It's great to be able to continue the conversation with you, Mariquita.
Thank you. Let us know who's watching, and please put your questions up in the chat for John. Today we're going to be talking about the man box and the moral compass of society, the oppression of minorities, of animals, of the planet. When men specifically are living in a world where they shut down their feelings and they're being judged as weak and as feminine, when they express emotions and recognize emotions. So when we're living in this world that is valuing domination, men are valued as producers and women are objects of reward and animals are commodities. From a philosophical perspective, John, what kind of moral framework creates this hierarchy of value?
Well, it certainly isn't a moral framework. I mean, if we view the world in these really simplistic and empirically and demonstrably false terms, then there's no possibility of a true ethical life, because moral life requires us to reflect on our values and to kind of notice the disjuncture between the is and the ought, that is to say, between the world as it is and the way it ought to be. So to the extent that we all are trapped in these structures of stereotypy, power relations, inequality, that keeps us from developing our full humanity as men and women.
Yes, and women are trapped as well, at being objectified. But as a woman, knowing that I have to be, well, society wants me to be skinny. Society demands that I'm sweet and pleasant all the time, and that I need to be submissive. And I actually did a master class on this with the feminine norms. I mean, prioritizing the care of the home and family, using all available resources for appearance. And then compared to the male norms, which is also always showing composure, never showing vulnerability, putting career and personal output above everything, pursuit of status, being willing to use violence if necessary. I mean, that's, I mean, applauded. Risk taking, being self-reliant. You don't need anyone, and being dominant over others. And so when we're set up in this society where we're being used as pawns, I mean, this is just a society where everyone is being used as a pawn and they're not even aware of it. I'm not aware, I mean, as a woman, let's say, I'm not aware that I'm trapped into never being beautiful enough and I have to use all my money to be young, and that society is in control of that, ultimately. And men are not aware. I mean, they are the commodity. I mean, they're the producers um, of and bringing home everything. I mean, and never being off. You always have to be on 24/7, and you always have to prove that you're a man. What could you say about this?
Well, there's so much to say about it. I guess I want to mention, just kind of to acknowledge and reinforce some of what you just said about femininity and the objectification that women experience, which is also self-objectification. I mean, women, especially heterosexual women who are socialized in our culture, right, they come to understand at a very young age as girls that these expectations of femininity are not freely chosen. They're compulsory, obligatory, right, and repressive. So there's an internalization of those norms. So I want to mention, for folks who are interested in this, Simone de Beauvoir's excuse me, famous book, The Second Sex, which came out in 1949, I think, 46 or 49. Beauvoir, of course, was one of the great philosophers of the 20th century, and she did what we call an existential phenomenology of gender and women. I know that sounds very complicated, but it's a fascinating book about how men and women are trapped in these gender roles and how women get the short end of the stick, right? I mean, at that time, and even in my mother's own time, women couldn't, for example, open a bank account without a man's signature and so forth. So, and I also want to mention my friend, late friend, Sandy Barkey's work. Sandy was a professor of philosophy in Chicago, and she wrote an essay called Suffering to be Beautiful, where she reflects on what it's like to be a woman who has to, as you say, invest in these beauty products and so forth, and essentially self-objectify in order to meet the demands of the male gaze, right? But I think one of the misunderstandings that men have of feminism is that somehow that's like, if men get on board with that project, then somehow we're emasculating ourselves, right? That it's somehow making us rendering men passive, excuse me, passive and weak and so forth, which is just ridiculous. I mean, it's actually a weakness when guys feel they have to, buy a muscle car or bomb another country in order to shore up their fragile ego, as we're seeing, with Trump in Iran or whatever. I mean, that's part of what's going on here. It just shows that vulnerability, which you've talked about in your work, that vulnerability, when not addressed and not substantively dealt with, leads to desublimated aggression, say, a kind of unhelpful, socially destructive forms of engagement with others in the world. And so it's really damaging to men and boys to have to conform to this toxic masculine model that we all know about being all the things you said, being aggressive, violent, risk-taking to the point of recklessness. And as you know, our wider culture is really just going back to the dark ages in terms of this stuff with the whole manosphere. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. With the manosphere valorizing forms of masculine identity that are incredibly unhelpful.
Yes, and I saw one of those influencers. They were shooting like a crocodile or alligator, and everyone was laughing. It's sickening. It's absolutely sickening. And this is what our young men are watching. Y'all, let us know if you have any questions also. But I don't know how bad it can get if this is normalized. I mean, it's incredible the level of the lack of morality we have right now in our society. And raising a young boy, you send him off, and Judy Chu's work, she talks about the men worried about their children, the young men, the little boys, and losing that expressiveness that comes when you're feeling, and the fathers knowing that they're going to go off to school and then they're going to be shunned if they show that feeling, and how to raise a child where he can show that feeling at school and not be bullied and called God knows what. How do you do that?
It's frightening for many parents, at least the ones who have any sensitivity to what's happening in our culture. And the problem is we can't take a voluntarist approach to this. Voluntarism is this kind of sociological idea that problems in society can be solved through individual acts. So what happens is that the responsibility for the whole problems of society fall on the shoulders of the individual parent, who are fighting a losing battle against, violent video game culture, pornography, AI. You know what I mean? It's sort of, there's only so much that someone parenting a child in this destructive, toxic culture can do to protect their kid. There was a study, I saw this story in the New York Times a few years ago, very recently, of eighth graders in Britain. I can't remember if it was eighth graders or 8-year-olds, who were holding up Andrew Tate as the ideal role model. Andrew Tate, of course, the influencer, rapist, and misogynist who views women as scum, really, and who's been, tried for or has faced criminal charges for sex trafficking and so forth. That's the role model that kids get. And this is across the board. We find these right-wing ideologies, misogyny, being reproduced willfully by influencers, far-right politicians, but also now reproduced through algorithm and by algorithm. There's been studies of this, that young people are being, especially young boys, are being targeted just through an automation process, the automation of misogyny, the automation of toxic masculinity. Because capitalism doesn't regulate itself, and because capitalism essentially controls the state, there's nothing being done to protect young boys and girls from these influences.
Yeah, and when you were talking about the Manosphere, the documentary, and then the young men have this idea that they're set up to fail, or that they have something again, that I don't remember their exact words, but like the women have it made. You just are beautiful, but we have to fight our way to the top. Where are they getting this idea from?
Yeah, they're obviously wrong about that. Yes, there are enormous unjust pressures on boys and men, absolutely, but it's girls and women who suffer even more, fundamentally, through systemic inequality, through lack of personal safety. And I think that for boys and men, they just don't have any exposure to the experiences, in many cases, of girls and women. They're really naive about it, but I would say they're almost willfully naive, in the sense that because of their own vulnerability and hurt, they want something to glom onto to account for, explain their own experiences in the world. You know what I mean? And so to be able to blame, to be able to scapegoat some, group is a very attractive option. Now, in my work, I talk about what the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called bad faith. Bad faith is when we deceive ourselves about our own choices and values and freedom, right? And Sartre wrote this very interesting book in the post-war period called Anti-Semite and Jew, where he looked at anti-Semitism not as a set of prejudices or mistaken understandings of Jewish people, but as an existential project, a passion in which the anti-Semite organizes his or her whole identity around the hatred of this other group. Because, you can say, well, this group, members of this group are running the world. They're the reason we don't have jobs. They're the reason that our culture is becoming corrupted and so forth. And there's no empirical evidence you can give to the contrary that the anti-Semite will accept, because it's not that kind of thing. It's not evidence-based. It's irrational. Well, it's the same thing for other forms of racism, and the same thing for patriarchy and hatred of women. You know, the whole incel movement, right, of millions of young boys and men. Well, I don't know what the numbers are. It could be millions, certainly hundreds of thousands, who blame girls and women for their inability to have sexual relations. You know, this bitterness, which then has led to actual murders like the Isla Vista murders in California, or even before incel had a name, Marc Le Pen's murder of over a dozen women at the École Polytechnique in Montreal back in the 80s, like that, where he just lined women up, went from room to room at this prestigious engineering university, lined women up and just gunned them down, and calling them all a bunch of feminists, quote unquote, because he had had a hard time adjusting in society. He'd been rejected, his application to this elite university, so he blamed women. So, sorry to go on for so long, but basically what I'm saying is that there are, alienated human beings strive to make meaning of their world, and they will choose, in many cases, the easier of the two options if the option is real self-examination and kind of owning up to one's own limitations and failures, versus, on the other hand, being able to blame somebody or some group for what leads to their discontent, right? So if we really want to understand the prevalence of misogyny in the manosphere, we have to understand capitalist relations and how individuals more and more are powerless. They don't just feel powerless, they actually are powerless, right? Because the upper 0.001% of the population by wealth controls everything. And that's more and more the case. So that trickles down into our identities and our purposes. So it's a complex problem, but we really need to peel back the layers if we want to have anything like a just society or a thriving human personality.
Right. And no wonder so many people say, there's nothing I can do about it. And then they don't take action because they feel helpless, because they're in this trap. And so many people don't believe the system. I mean, the system is deceitful. It's all about money. Everything's about money. Keep women thinking they're not good enough, right? So they always have to buy all this, $100, $200 creams and, God knows how much on this and that. And then the men are working to prove man enough. Let me shoot this. Let me kill this. Let me, oppress animals. Let me oppress them, not care at all about nature. Let me make sure that this is such a trap. Even the lawns have to be beautiful. How has it come down to that even?
Well, this is a pathology, and this is a civilizational pathology. And what I mean is it goes way back, like this idea that humans are superior to all the other beings on the earth, which gives us a natural right to dominate them, to kill them, to exploit them. That goes back thousands of years, right? And it has had ideological justification. In ancient Greek thought, the idea of natural hierarchy between masters and slaves, men over women, humans over animals. So that's one example, but kind of central to our culture, Western culture. Gender roles, the sexual division of labor goes back even before that, or certainly it grew up alongside that. The idea that men are transcendent beings, as to say that men have their true essence kind of in the stars, in intellectual growth, in overcoming the forces of nature, whereas women are immanent, as to say that women are indistinguishable from their bodies, and so they don't have any capacity to transcend, to define themselves. They're already defined, by their beauty or their sexual reproduction capability and so on. So again, ancient roots, but now that stuff is being weaponized by the far right and by the tech industry because capitalism is a patriarchal institution. I've been talking about, I mentioned capitalism, but you can't separate it out, separate capitalism out from male dominance, right? Because look who controls the Fortune 500 companies. Look at the bozos who are running, the tech industry and AI, Sam Altman and Sam Almaty and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Alex Karp and all of these horrible human beings who are really, they represent the true failure of a certain conception of masculine power and capitalist worth and so on. So that's where we are. And, so naturally we all feel kind of powerless in the face of that, but we have to organize collectively. That's our only hope for saving the earth, actually, which is being destroyed.
Right. And what about the women that are supporting these men? I mean, when I saw the manosphere and those women that were just happy to be treated like objects, what is going on there?
Well, I mentioned Sartre's philosophical theory of bad faith, which is when we surrender our true autonomy and freedom because it's somehow less threatening an option than to take full responsibility for our being in the world and for our choices and our values. So yeah, you've always had folks who are oppressed who side with their oppressor out of weakness, out of psychological cowardice in some cases. So it's either out of kind of coercion or complicity because of the rewards that one gets, right? So there are women now, unbelievably, who are actually supporting overturning suffrage. I mean, really, it's hard to make this stuff up. I mean, it's hard to, I can find it very hard to believe that in the 21st century, there are actually American women who are like wanting to not only return to the domestic sphere, but want to keep other women from voting because they don't see that as a role that women should be involved in. I thought we had won that battle over 100 years ago. But so it's hard to imagine. And in my book, as you know, the Omnivore's Deception, I have a chapter on the so-called femivores. These are women who have taken up hunting, cattle ranching, chicken farming, and so forth as a supposed way of achieving this transcendence that has traditionally been the realm of men. Now, how do they achieve the sense of empowerment, of self-fulfillment, of flourishing? Well, by dominating, hurting, and killing other vulnerable beings, other animals. And they claim that as a feminist project. But, there are many feminists who would sharply disagree with that. And for very good reason. You can't, if you're going to define freedom, women's freedom, as being like men, and Catherine McKinnon pointed this out, the legal scholar and feminist philosopher, Catherine McKinnon pointed this out, then that's the wrong standard. Like if I'm a woman and I think, well, the best I can be is to be like a man, and moreover, to accept and embrace traditionally masculine values such as violence and aggression and hurting the vulnerable, that to call that feminist or to say that to conflate that with women's liberation is preposterous. And yet it's prevalent. It's increasingly prevalent.
Yes, it is preposterous. It's sickening. I don't even understand it. And now where empathy is being laughed at, and how can we even be in a civilization where empathy is, mocked, and it seems to be fine that people mock it, acceptable to mock empathy?
Well, I think that that's really, really significant, actually, and not talked about enough. Elon Musk has publicly said that he's identified empathy as one of the greatest threats to Western culture, quote unquote. Now, Musk is a white supremacist through and through, and when he talks about Western culture, he means white Anglo-Saxon culture. But it's telling that he would mention that, or it's telling that there was a book a few years ago, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, called Against Empathy, and it was a bestseller. Well, so you got to ask why. So it's there's always some nutcase writing some stupid book, but when a book taps into the zeitgeist and such that it becomes, a New York Times bestseller or whatever, then you have to kind of put on your hat as a sociologist and political theorist and think, well, what is up with that? Why is it that people are getting into that? Well, I don't know the demographics, but I would guess that the readership of Against Empathy were mostly men. I would be surprised if it wasn't mostly men, because it's confirming the dominant values of the ruling elite, right? And Marx and Engels pointed this out in the German ideology, nearly 200 years ago, namely that the ideas of the ruling class, the ideas that are kind of dominant in a culture coincide with the ideas and values of the ruling class. It's like a trickle-down effect, like trickle-down economics, except it's a trickle-down of ideological prejudices. So empathy, which is this, as you know, and we've talked about this vital capacity we have. It isn't just an emotion, right? It's a way of knowing the world. It's a way of investigating moral phenomena. If I see someone suffering and I don't feel anything, well, I'm not going to investigate further. I'm not going to be provoked into action to remedying the situation of this other suffering being, right? So in order to see, you have to feel. In order to be able to see what's before you, you have to, as a phenomenon, you have to have that emotional capacity, because that allows us to, right, co-feel. That's what empathy is. You feel your way into the being of the other. If you have no empathy, then, and you have a baby, then the baby's probably has a good chance of starving to death, because you're not going to get out of bed at 3 a.m. to feed that baby if you have no empathy, and you're not going to be in healthy relationships either, by the way. And this touches on your theme, the theme of this podcast, of this show, and which is how men and boys are stripped. They're being de-skilled, socially de-skilled, emotionally de-skilled, right, by being told from birth, that caring for other people, having compassion for other beings is sissy work. It's effeminate, and so on, right?
Yes, I mean, I saw it a few weeks ago at the pond, a little boy crying because a fish was on a hook and the boy was crying for the fish, and they were screaming at him to be quiet. And there was the mother screaming. This tiny little boy, you could see that if he was being hurt. And I just think, what's going to happen to that little boy? I mean, he's starting shutting down of the feelings and learning that you can't express emotion because it's bad. And empathy is bad, and you're being made fun of. And I don't know what, I mean, we see what's happened to the world now, what's happening in the planet. I mean, who even thinks about the planet anymore? It's like a big pretending, a pretending that this, now I learned this word from you, this soporific life, this shallowness, this drudgery of life is satisfying us. We have to pretend that, like, oh, well, I can go out and whatever, make myself, I mean, whatever I can do to my body to make myself more beautiful, now I can pretend that I'm happy, right? And then the man can pretend that he's got this wonderful salary, the house, and it's all pretend, and all, again, being controlled by these, whatever percentage it is, the 1%, all about the money, all about I don't know, it's a rat race where you never win. And people, I don't even know if they're aware they're pretending.
These structures really extend down into the deepest recesses of the self, right? So the denial, the hiding of the facts, the truth from oneself, it becomes inveterate. It just becomes built in. And I want to go back to that great example you gave of the kid crying, with this seeing this writhing worm on a hook. I remember distinctly my father taking me fishing for the first time. I was just a very little kid. I don't know, maybe 6 or something like that. And I remember my father taking out worms, which, surprised me. And then he put a worm on a hook. And I don't remember exactly what I said. I think I did say something, but I know that I felt kind of nauseated by it. And my father, as I recall, so a very long time ago, reassured me that, well, the worm doesn't feel anything. And I mentioned this, and my father really loved animals, and he was very kind to animals mostly. I mean, whatever, he didn't go out of his way to kill insects and so forth. Um, but I had, even at that age, as kids do, a moral intuition, right? That there was something askew there. And what happened to me in that instance, and in other instances, as it does for everyone, is like I put those doubts to one side, right? Kids are remarkably intuitive, particularly with other animals. And so what might have arisen as a contradiction in my own life, or thinking that I might have attended to work through, that kind of was quashed. And that's just common, because especially with boys, you're supposed to be macho, and you're supposed to, it's not that you're not supposed to have feelings. It's okay to have anger in some circumstances, or it's okay to be joyful at taking down a buck, with your first kill. So it's not quite true that boys are not put in touch with their feelings. It's just that those feelings get attached to an identity formation that is destructive to self and other, right? And that certain parts of the human personality that ought to be valorized aren't being valorized, and on the contrary, are being mocked and subordinated to this masculine vision of control and domination over everybody and everything.
Yeah, you're right. It's very applauded when when men have feelings of lust and they, do what they want with a woman. I mean, look, we know, grab them by the, you know, and all these kind of this BS, right? That's applauded and it's fine. The locker room talk, that's all it is, right? How can people, I just saw a woman who, when she thought that was, she heard talk like this and she thought it was someone else, it was wrong. But when she heard that it was, you know, the person that said it, then all of a sudden, oh, it's fine. It's just guys being guys. How can this be? How do people do that? I mean, they have this toggle, on, off
In
morality.
indeed. I may have said this in our last conversation, but I am astounded at how easily people are able to live with contradiction. Like, as a philosopher, a lot of, especially kind of more modern philosophy beginning in the 20th century, philosophers have been really concerned with kind of logical consistency. And so if I hold belief X, but then I also hold the belief not X, that's maybe weird and a problem, kind of irrationality, right? And so when humans, on the one hand, love their cats and dogs, and on the other hand, think nothing of eating a chicken salad sandwich or, bacon, well, that's a contradiction, because if you're treating like beings, and cats and birds and fish are like beings, they say there's a continuity of consciousness, complexity of cognition and emotions. You're treating like beings in an unlike way. They say dissimilarly. These beings you're going to love and say are worthy. These beings you're going to torture and kill and say they're unworthy. Then there's something wrong with you and not with these beings. So, as you say, with the locker room example, grab them by the X. It is bizarre. It's just a quirk of our personalities, and again, it comes down to kind of psychological self-deception, and the things that we hold on to, because they stabilize us. They create a world that's meaningful and coherent and non-threatening. Another example would be the 9/11 attacks. Many Americans believe these wild conspiracy theories involving whatever, the Masons and Queen Elizabeth, and you think, well, that's weird. But I think that in many cases, those conspiratorial beliefs are less threatening to Americans than the plainer truth, which is that 19 clever guys with box cutters terrorized a nation of 300 million people as blowback to American foreign policy and are mucking around in the world and supporting dictatorships in the Middle East, for decade on decade on decade, and fighting unjust wars and killing hundreds of thousands of people. You know what I'm saying? Like that simpler truth that's hiding in plain sight that would cause us perhaps to examine our own nature as a superpower, examine our own complicity in that aggression abroad. That's more threatening than this idea that there's a secret cabal of folks who were running the world, which you would think would be the scarier option, but actually not. And for the same reason, for Trump supporters, you don't want to mention them, but people who support authoritarian populist leaders, they are less concerned about the destruction of democracy than a destabilization of their own gender identity or sense of powerlessness.
Well, I spoke to a supporter of the far right, and I asked, he was saying, oh, yes, that's the personality. That's the personality. And I said, is it personality or morality? Right. And what's your argument there when they say what would you say to that person? When he said, oh, that's just the personality. That's the way it is, and it's the ends are justify the means. That's another thing I've heard.
It's morally disgusting, and it's stupid. It's willfully stupid, because if there was someone who came into this person's life and treated their mother this way, or their sister, or whatever, they would be rightly upset about it. I assume it's a man, whatever. But and to give, I don't even know where to begin with that. Say personality. This is like the essence of bad faith, because it's on the one hand saying that, oh, well, if I say these rotten things, that's just who I am, which is actually a lie, because as a transcendent being, I always have the potential to change who I am. I'm not who I am in the way the pencil is what it is. The pencil can't change. I can change. So first of all, that's already a dodge. Say, oh, well, Trump is just being Trump. That doesn't tell us anything. Why is he choosing to be this way is the question, right? But then furthermore, the fact that people say that they support that, and they say, oh, it's just personality, is itself bad faith, because it's saying, it's denying what is obvious, which is this person doesn't have character. This person doesn't respect half of the human race, which happens to be female. This person doesn't actually have leadership qualities, doesn't actually have a moral compass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's to embrace untruth, right? It's to embrace lies and self-deception. So yeah, I don't have any patience for that sort of thing. Put them in touch with me.
Yes, that I would love to. Yes, a lot of times I will. People will want to get into just all sorts of trolling, and I always invite them to it. Well, not always, but I'll say, let's have a Zoom call, and then they shut up. They're not going to come on and talk. It's very easy to hide behind a screen. So, yeah. And Amira, thanks for watching. Yes, it's morally disgusting. And y'all, please subscribe this is going to be on YouTube. Facebook, it will disappear eventually, but Uncaged Heart Coaching. Yeah, and I don't even know what to say. I feel sick even at the thought of this, so many things you think that's the last straw. That's the last straw. There is no last straw. It's just like, whatever, whatever goes, and it doesn't matter. We're just going to put our heads in the sand. I don't know what the benefit of it is. It's the benefit for the wealthy. And how can the oppressed not feel it?
The problem, the chilling fact is that there's no bottom to this. You asked how bad can it get? Well, we have the example of past genocides and ongoing genocides to see how bad it gets. If you take these logics to their natural conclusion, right? You have the mass murder of people. You have, the justification for the murder of other beings, other animals. It's not an accident that the same people who are trying to roll back voting rights for women also have the most atrocious attitudes towards non-human animals. What was I just reading today that the Trump administration has done in terms of whatever, making it possible to exploit animals, or kill animals.
Something about the parks.
Oh, maybe opening the parks to hunting, or I can't even recall. It's just so many of these things. It's part of the same tapestry of domination, and and it doesn't help any of us. I mean, I guess it helps the rich because they have their bunkers and they have their jet planes and luxury items, and it mutilates their own personality. I mean, Trump for example, is a very pathetic human being. I mean, he has no ego structure, and I think it's a very lonely place there. Anyone who hasn't seen Citizen Kane, I won't give away the ending of Citizen Kane, the movie, but you have a sense by the end of the film of what power really costs the individual in terms of the soul, right? Their own soul. But that aside, like you look at these wars, these endless wars that this country continues to wage abroad. We're spending $1.45 trillion a year now on warfare, and that's an undercount probably, because if you look at the amount of money we're paying to veterans and so forth, all of the casualties of our wars, it's more than that, or the interest on our past military actions, the debt we acquired. So, and what did those wars, let's just take the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. What did those buy the American people? Well, I've seen estimates of $3 trillion cost, thousands of American servicemen and women killed, hundreds of thousands of civilians killed. That trauma ripple, even the death, the unjust killing of one child in those conflicts ripples out through time. I mean, it just devastates families in all sorts of ways. The trauma, the grief, and it goes on. It's intergenerational trauma. And now we're seeing the same thing in Gaza with probably hundreds of thousands of people killed in what Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and others call genocide. Why? Who does this benefit? Well, as we've been talking about, does benefit maybe the upper tiny 1%. But the question is why people keep going along with this madness, right? And it's everything we're talking about. This clinging, this attachment to forms of gender and identity that are just destroying everything fundamentally.
All right. So Ray has a question. Is there an argument that machismo is actually a natural evolution from a common ancestor with gorillas that we can recognize as just another aspect of obsolete instinct in a morally civilized world?
Let me take a look at that. Thank you for the question, Ray. Is there an argument that machismo is actually natural? I guess I'm a little hesitant to go down that road because it's kind of suggesting that, well, it's this primitive stuff that we inherited from other animals, and now, we have these evolved ways of thinking and being, and so this is a kind of reversion to something earlier. I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think that the problems that have led to war and aggression and so forth are social problems. There's nothing biological that I haven't seen any evidence that there's like a biological imperative for humans to kill other beings, or that it's something encoded in our past. I don't think so, because, gorillas don't wage war on one another. Gorillas don't torture every other animal that comes across their path, right? Humans are omnicidal. We kill everybody, everything on this planet.
I know.
So you know what I mean? So I don't think it's, I see what you're saying. There's a follow-up here point from you, Ray. Thank you. Don't just the instinct. I don't dispute that we have, in what Freud called libidinal needs or instincts that can come out in all sorts of different ways. But it's the question of how they come out that becomes a social problem. For example, in Freud's theory, right, we have, quote, animal, unquote, aggression, say, like that's something that maybe, the fight or flight response, whatever. But what Freud would say is we sublimate that in creating the Cathedral Notre Dame or world literature. In other words, we can take these powerful embodied emotions and control them, channel them right into things. So then why are some of these powerful emotions and feelings and instincts channeled in these socially destructive ways? Well, the philosopher Herbert Marcuse wrote a lot about this. I really recommend some of his work, like One-Dimensional Man, or an essay on aggressiveness in advanced industrial society that appeared in his book Negations back in 1968, I think. So again, I think it becomes too easy to say, oh, well, these are just kind of leftover animal feelings, or no, these are politicized feelings. These are feelings that a certain group of people are using. People within this group are using to legitimate their power and authority, and for all these complex psychological reasons, a lot of people buy into it. But yeah, I don't know. That's my take on it.
Yeah, and Ray's a climate healer with me. Violence is a side effect of intellect that we must master in ourselves. Gorillas don't war.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah, thank you for the question and the comment.
Yeah. So, all right. So, what? Tell me, what did you witness as a child, as a little boy, in this? Being taught to be, or did you feel the pressure of being a man? Being this man that can be lustful and angry and all of that. Do you remember have any childhood besides the worm story? Anything else?
Well, yeah, I mean, I could go into that at great length, but I guess what I'd say is, first of all, my experience was racially filtered or something. I mean, like from the time I was just a few years old, I was racially bullied as one of the only Asian American kids in a very white area, namely South Shore of Massachusetts. So my identity can't be kind of separated out from that experience, right? And the need, and as a smaller kid, who if I'd been a big, powerful, athletic kid, the kids would have been a little more careful about what they said about me, or adults for that matter. So the formation of my own masculine self, I can't disaggregate that from these other experiences or needs that I had. So I was very vulnerable. I was very angry. I was very hurt. And so I think that's one reason I actually tortured insects as a kid. I mean, I should be a little bit more specific, but I used to kill ants in particular, and I talk about this in my book. So I'm very sad that I did that, but I think I can understand why now, right? Because I had this aggression that had no other outlet. So I enacted it on beings who were helpless and more vulnerable than I was. And at the same time, I was fascinated with guns and with like James Bond. Like I remember, I identify with James Bond, this little Asian American Jewish kid wanting to be Sean Connery, right? But in the same way that, today's generation of boys and young men aspire to be whoever, one of these superheroes. And so that Now, at the same time, because I was part of a marginalized group of one, I also developed empathy at a young age, for a variety of familial as well as social reasons. And so, thank God, if I could go back, I would not. I certainly would not want all of the stuff that was dumped on me. It was very hard, like the violence and racial bullying and stuff. So I'm not going to say, oh, well, I'm glad I had that experience because then I became more empathetic. No, I don't feel that way. But I am, glad that I was able to feel empathy for people in other situations. Like in my junior high school, I saw, mentally disabled kids being terrorized. And there was this one high school girl who ended up committing suicide. And it just, breaks my heart even now to think about those kinds of losses and the people who get left behind or who exist on the margins, aren't noticed. My friend Jessie Klein, who's an academic at Adelphi University in New York, wrote a book called The Bully Society, where she's a sociologist, and she studied school shootings. And in almost every case, these are boys who were bullied and were mistreated, with their masculinity impugned and so forth. And then one day, well, they decided to show everybody that they really were tough, by murdering their classmates, mostly girls, actually, So, yeah, so I think, we all as young, I think almost everyone, or maybe everyone as a child, we all struggle. We all have to deal with our feelings of not quite fitting in or belonging, and we develop what Wilhelm Reich called character armor to kind of defend the ego from, being undermined by these external threats and so forth. So I have my share, but I've worked out a lot of stuff in therapy, thank God. So.
Well, good. I appreciate your honesty. I mean, and your self-awareness is what needs to happen. And well, power over. So, I mean, we're living in this power over. How do we switch? What's the solution to power with, where where we can support each other and we can be interconnected, which people are thinking interconnected. I'm not interconnected with that ant or with that cow, but we are. What is the solution from this domination to the stewardship? What can we do?
Well, it's a great question. There are many things we can do. There's no one single thing, I think. I mean, as an educator, a college professor, I'm fortunate that I can expose my students to ideas and facts and experiences they otherwise wouldn't get exposed to, simply because the hegemonic culture keeps those things from them. And so what do I mean? I mean, just like world cinema, like they've never heard of the French New Wave. They've never heard of Italian neorealism. They've never seen a Bergman film. These cultural artifacts expose them to an aesthetic experience that they wouldn't have, which deepens their personalities. But by the same token, I'll show them undercover videos of our violence against animals in the food industry, which they otherwise wouldn't encounter, or philosophers who get them to think outside the boxes that they've been put in. So education, I'm a big believer, obviously, in education and raising a public awareness. At the same time, as you know, there are many courageous activists, local activists in communities across the world who are intervening on behalf of the vulnerable. For example, the people in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and elsewhere who have formed civil organizations of solidarity with immigrant communities and individuals who are being hunted down by ICE agents and rendered to torture camps in other countries and disappeared from our streets or separated from their children. And so there's direct action, nonviolent action. I'm a believer in nonviolent action, and collective action. I mean, this is the problem. One problem we're facing is for a variety of complex reasons, the political left has all but surrendered to an anarchistic view of social change, where we're not supposed to have coherent organizations, leaders, strategy, philosophically coherent ideas, theories of praxis. I talk about this in my first book, The Postmodern Prince, a little bit. So we're in a kind of holding pattern where every day the world gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And every day the left seems able only to protest it, in these symbolic ways, expressive ways, without a strategy for overturning these structures of power and authority. I mean, ultimately, the rich have to be nonviolently eliminated. If not eliminated, then defanged. They should not have control over technology. They should not have control over the means of life. They should not have control over our governments and institutions. They control everything. And if they were benevolent dictators, then maybe we could all go along with them, but they're not. They're not benevolent at all. They're ruthless sociopathic, power-hungry, misogynistic monsters, human monsters, They've got to be stopped. They've got to be stopped, or there's not going to be anything left to this planet, because we're emptying the earth of its, conscious life.
Yeah, and we're paying the price right now. I mean, with the manosphere, the attitudes of empathy, all of this, we're paying the price. The planet's paying the price. Every one of us is paying the price, but we're not aware of it. Women are paying the price. Men are paying the price. Everyone is a pawn. So, the best we can do is wake up and help people wake up as well, and stand strong in our beliefs, not just turn our heads. My God, it's what we're losing. Every day we're going down, down, down and losing. So, yeah. So what do you recommend people do? What can they buy? What can they watch? I know you said a few things, and where can they get your books? More importantly.
Thank you so much. I do tackle most of the questions that we've talked about today in my book. It's that said, I just touched the surface of things. But if folks found this conversation interesting, and they want to think about or think with us about the connections, between masculinity and ecocide, or the oppression of animals and women and so forth, then my book is not a bad place to start. Maybe it's called The Omnivore's Deception. You can find it on a little website called Amazon.com, or you can buy it directly from my publisher, which is New York University Press. And if folks are, struggling economically, whatever, if you contact me, I can give you a 30% discount, or a coupon you can put in for 30% discount from the publisher's price. I think the book is only $30 though. It's not that much money. And that's for the hardcover. There is no softcover as yet. So other than that, there's a ton of things to read and learn. I mentioned some of the things today, but folks have specific questions or concerns, or areas they want recommendations for, I'm happy to recommend a few things. Just contact me at my university.
Wow. Well, I know this is I feel hopeful there. Every time I talk to you, I feel very hopeful. Like,
wow,
we're very grounded in this. Yes, because it's like so many people are asleep, right? But to have the knowledge base that you have, and the awareness, it really is inspiring. So yeah, a lot of times I'll be like, oh my gosh, does anybody get it? But I do have my group. And then, so thank you so much for coming on here. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to, and everyone that's watching, Dina and Ray, and they're all taking action, and Mira and Daniel Broccoli, and I can't get up here in the vegan anthem. I wish I could put all your comments up, but anyway, y'all, I'm watching on the replay, JJ, and hopefully I didn't miss anyone. But John, yeah, you are, gosh, I don't even, there are no words. So thank you so much for everything.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and I want to thank your viewers for participating and keeping keeping hope alive, as Jesse Jackson used to say. It's very hard. I mean, we're in darkening times. It's going to get much darker, friends, much, much darker. And we have to find the courage to resist and to reach out to one another. So thank you.
Yes, thank you all. And please subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.